Hi, I'm Robin Levesque, and I work with organizations that want to co-create a culture of positive leadership at every level to reduce the cost of stress, absenteeism, and turnover, and increase employee engagement, effectiveness, and client satisfaction. Welcome, everyone, to Dare to Thrive, How to Build Personal Resilience in a World Gone Nuts. My co-facilitator, Mitra Mohamadzadeh, is here today. I'm so excited to have her join me with this session. It's the first time that we've gone online together to present material. We've been collaborating for several years, but this is our first time with an actual posting online. So welcome and thank you. So let's start with what's in a title. So I'm highlighting here on the slide deck, Dare. Okay, so Dare is about courage. We are in an unprecedented time right now. I hope at what is going to be the end of the COVID era or the pandemic era. So I'm calling it the post-pandemic era. And it's a time for courage. It's a time to move forward. It's a time for hope. And in the design of this title, we've designed that into the wording. Dare is for courage. Thrive is for moving forward. So with courage, we look towards the future. We don't just want to survive this pandemic, this COVID-19. We want to be able to come out at the other end better, a better person than when we started. We want our families to be better, and so on. So courage towards the future. How to build personal resilience. So personal resilience is the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity. It's combining that surviving and that thriving so that we do improve, we do grow personally and professionally. And then finally, my favorite word in this title is nuts. What do I mean by that? Well, nuts is an acronym for newness of the experience, uncertainty, threat to ego, and sense of control, or the lack of sense of control. So N, newness, novelty. This pandemic, this COVID-19, something that is unprecedented for most of us. We've never gone through anything like this before, and it's scary, right? It's a new experience. We don't know what to expect. The U stands for uncertainty, the unknown, right? We don't know what's going to happen as a result of this. We talk about the new normal, but we really don't know what that looks like. Some of us might have a better idea than others, but there's a lot of uncertainty for me anyway. I'm not quite sure what that looks like. Then we have T for threat to ego. It's, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe this is happening to my family. Some have lost jobs. Some have lost their businesses. Some have lost a good portion of their business. Some have lost their savings. And, some of us have even lost some loved ones. So unfortunate. So there's that threat to ego, that, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening right now. And then finally, we have sense of control, or the lack of sense of control. I think a lot of us are anxious about not having any level of control, or very little level of control. Government is telling us what to do. Our employers are telling us what to do. There's some, enforcement agencies are involved, and so on. So there's that element of a lack of sense of control. So that's what we're going to address in this workshop, is how can we go from nuts to thrive, okay? And we're combining two proven methodologies to do that. The first one is positive leadership, which is a combination of positive psychology, best practices in appreciative inquiry, including mindfulness, and also best practices in leadership, especially positive leadership, also known as resonant conscious leadership. There are several things we could call it, but I wrap it up in the umbrella of positive leadership. And then Mitra, starting tomorrow, will start presenting on the grief recovery method, something that I discovered through her a few years ago that was amazing in taking me the rest of the way. Okay, so the system that I'm going to present to you, the positive leadership system, will probably get you there 75, 80% of the way. But that last 20%, the really tough part, that's what Mitra is going to help you with, using the grief recovery method, which is a way to resolve conflicts in your life, to resolve incomplete relationships that you may have, and to let go of that which does not serve you. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to that component of the workshop. So a little bit about us. I'm Robin Levesque. As I say, I work with organizations to co-create positive leadership at every level. I'm an author, speaker, trainer. I've written 2 books. The first one is called Shine. It's about overcoming adversity and embracing success. So this was co-authored with other authors, and we reached #1 bestseller on Amazon. And right now I'm just about to release my own book called Resonate to Co-Create, a Transformative Learning Adventure into Positive Leadership. I am an adjunct university instructor at Royal Roads University, at the University of Northern British Columbia, Camosun College, University of Victoria, and I've also taught at the University of Calgary, Medicine Hat College, and Bard College in New York City. I'm also a corporate trainer. I'm the founder of Dream MK Positive Leadership. We do workshops with corporations to help them co-create that positive leadership. I also teach project management and communication. And this is my good friend and colleague, Mitra. She is also an author, speaker, trainer. I'll let her talk about her books later on. She is also a university instructor who has taught all over the world. She's originally from the Middle East, so she's taught there, Europe, Canada, US. And most exciting of all, she is a grief recovery method specialist, which she's been doing for a few years. She's had a lot of success in this area. In fact, she is the face of the grief recovery method in Iran, her home country, where she has actually translated the book on grief recovery method into Farsi and has opened the very first community on teaching her countrywomen on the grief recovery method. And she likes to especially work with newcomers and on inclusiveness. So for these sessions, I like to set what I call the Vegas rules. So just a bit of a social contract with our audience. So the first one is be present and just to be in the moment. It's easy to start thinking about all the other stuff going on in our life right now, but it's nice to take a moment with these workshops where we can just focus on the learning and focus on our own experience. We ask people to turn their cell phones off or on vibrate, if possible, not to interrupt the session. And these are the really important ones. This is a safe practice space. Okay, so this is a workshop for a reason. We call it a workshop for a reason. We get you to try out some instruments, to break out into some smaller groups, to work with your colleagues. But it's important to remember that it's a practice space. We're practicing for the future. We're practicing to get better at life. The next one, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So there's an element of confidentiality in these workshops. People share their ideas, their experiences, their fears, their concerns, and so on. And we want to respect that confidentiality in this safe space. And then finally, have fun. This is an opportunity to learn something new, to practice, to meet some new people. Okay. And it's like I said, it's a workshop, so you'll be working, but and so it's not me and Mitra talking at you for 3 days, but you'll have an opportunity to practice the tools and work with other people. Let's start with the source. Mitra and I were having an interesting conversation this morning before the session, and we talked about the source, the root. And Mitra, can you come online just to help me out? The root and the what was the follow-up to that?
Sure. Thank you. We were talking about the root and the fruit.
Yes, the root and the fruit. I love that.
Yeah,
so
the fruit that we have learned how to manage our anger, stress, how to increase our emotional intelligence, lots of training personally and all people that I have been working with. But the reality, they were the fruit. Is like the gardener. When you start with fruit, you always feel like nuts. where is my root? And we have realized that we were talking together this morning that, yeah, the reality, we need to work on the foundation of our root. What's the reason that I get anxious, the stress comes, and this is root and fruit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitra. That's wonderful. So yeah, that really caught my attention in terms of the root and the fruit, because later on we'll talk about beliefs and values,
yes,
in particular limiting beliefs and how they drive our behavior, our actions, and our habits, right? So it's the same concept as the fruit starts somewhere, and sometimes we're unaware of where that starting point is. And that's a good segue into this definition of stress. So a very common definition of stress is a reaction to a real or perceived threat. Real or perceived threat. Emphasis on perceived. So that's a big problem in our society today, is that we perceive a lot of things to be stress that really isn't, or perceived threats that aren't really threats, right? So this could be a threat to our ego, a threat to our safety, a threat to a certain situation. And one of my colleagues talks a lot about brain psychology, and she says that 95% of what we're afraid of never happens, right? So, but our body still reacts in the stress response, because that's how we're programmed. So stress is everywhere. We are pre-wired to experience stress because it's a survival mechanism, right? So as we evolved as a species, that's what gave us the ability to survive, to run away from that saber-toothed tiger, to fight, or to freeze, pretend that it doesn't see us, right? So that's the stress response, is typically these three things: fight, flight, or freeze. It's anything that knocks us out of homeostatic balance, right? So our chemistry, if it's thrown out, that's a stress. It increases the load in our system, and cortisol, as well as other chemicals that are detrimental to our health if it's sustained. So it has an effect on our body, mind, and behavior. Okay, so again, going back to that concept of value, belief, stress. So those three things will have a tremendous impact on what we think, feel, and behave. So not all stress is bad. Here's what we call the stress curve. So in fact, we want a little bit of stress in our lives to make things interesting, right? So if we look at this particular scale here, we have pressure to get something done versus performance. And this applies anywhere on the sports fields, in the workplace, in our communities. We will see that if we're down here, if there's no pressure, none at all, right? Well, we're in the boredom stage, right? It's not all that exciting. As we're moving up the scale, we're putting up the pressure here. While we're moving up the curve, is we have the optimum sort of level here in the first half of the bell curve, right? So we want, there's an area we might be comfortable, but then we're performing at our best down in here, but then we get into the strain. If there's too much stress, in particular what we call distress, there's different types of stress. Eustress is the good stress, and the distress is the bad stress. We get into this area here called strain, and then if that's sustained over time and it's too much, we get into what we call burnout. Okay, so that's when we're really not able to see clearly, to perform. You see the performance curve goes down significantly and very quickly at this point. So what is personal resilience? I mean, we're calling our workshop about personal resilience. Well, it's the ability to bounce back from obstacles and adversity. So things happen, right? I know that we're responding to what a lot of people are going through in terms of the pandemic, COVID-19, and in particular, trying to provide tools and techniques to deal with the post-pandemic era, where we want to come back even better and even more self-aware, with a stronger personal vision, and have the ability to let go of the grief that we've suffered as a result. So we're trying to give ourselves the ability to bounce back from obstacles and activities. It's the ability to survive and thrive. I love this word and I should have capitalized the whole thing here, because often I talk about the power of and. It's not this or that, it's this and that. That's where the sweet spot is, right? So positive leadership and grief recovery. That's an amazing combination. It's not one or the other. Embrace both. It gives us the ability to survive, and that's the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, and then thrive. So that's the survive part, right? So oh, we made it. Now I get to move on, but how do I improve? How do I make it even better? That's the thrive part, which is doing what matters most in life, optimizing our best practices, well-being. Okay. We want to engage in intentional practices, routines, and habits. Okay. Reprogram our brains for success, for thriving, and so on. So what we're trying to achieve here is an optimal balance between distress and quality of life. Keep the stress at a manageable level, improve quality of life. And here we'll see, this is kind of a scale. So if you imagine that there's a 0 here, this is the level of distress down here, and we have the quality of life. So with the high quality of life and a low level of distress, we're able to get to this thrive and survive and thrive, green zone up here, right? So if we have a low, so low quality of life, we're in the yellow zone here, and also high is yellow, because we're missing out on part of the puzzle. Okay, we're trying to complete the puzzle here with high quality of life, low distress. And then finally we see here, this is where we really get in trouble, is with a low quality of life and a high level of distress. We have the red zone down here. So this workshop will try to get us to this high-low up here in the green zone, where we can improve our quality of life through practices like positive leadership and the grief recovery method, and keep our level of stress manageable, low. Okay, so I'd like you to think of a person that you would call resilient. Okay, we call this a contrasting exercise. There's 2 parts to it. So think of someone that you know that's always kind of, no matter what happens, they seem to bounce back. And sometimes they bounce back even better than the event happened, the trauma happened. Write that person's name down. Okay, now I'd like you to think about what this person said or did to make you think that they have this amazing ability to bounce back. So what did that person say or do? And then on a scale of 0 to 100%, how much do you like hanging out with that person? Okay, so 0 would be I don't even answer the phone when that person calls, and 100 is, oh my God, if I could spend all my time with that person, I would. Okay, so on a scale of 0 to 100%, so write down the name of the person that you can think of as being extremely resilient, what he or she does to make you think that way, and then your level of engagement with that person. And I'm going to debrief in a moment. So if you're like most people, the resilient person that you've chosen would likely be engaging, very supportive, open, appreciative. They share their journey, so they're a good model for what resilience looks like. They're friendly. In fact, a lot of them might become friends. Purpose. They have a purpose. They seem to be living life on purpose. And to sum it up, they're positive. Okay, so that's why we have positive leadership. And like if you're like most people, your level of engagement with these folks tends to be very, very high. So 80 to 100% is commonly where we end up here. Now, on the flip side, with the less resilient person, or person that lacks that resilience, the one that has the least, they're difficult to deal with. You know, they're typically negative. They could be critical. Sometimes they sound like a broken record, is repeating the same thing over and over again. They can even be hurtful, and unpredictable comes up as well. Is the consistency between what they say and what they do is not there, right? So that's and we just don't know what to expect from them. Quite often there's no follow through on their commitments, and yeah, there's that level of unpredictability. And in our debrief, we had scores as low as 0%, 1% with those people, and 10, 20%. So that's kind of the contrast between a very resilient person and one that lacks that resilience. Is our own personal engagement with that person is impacted significantly as a result, right? 80% to 100% compared to 0 to 20%, that's a drastic difference, right? Does resilience matter? I think so. Which person would you rather hang out with? Hopefully the resilient person, because those types of things, thoughts, emotions, resilience, they're contagious. We are social animals. Therefore, how we show up in the world, our state of mind, our state of emotions, our feelings, has a tremendous impact on those that are closest to us. Now, especially if you're a leader, this has a very significant impact, because how you show up as a leader has a significant impact on how others are going to feel, think, and perform. Okay, so that's why we call it positive leadership. And then the reverse is true as well. If you're dissonant, if you show up not at your best, that's going to have a negative impact on the people that you work with. So, you know, I'll talk briefly about my perfect storm, where I got to start testing some of this system to its most extreme. A few years ago, I hit what I call my perfect storm. In the span of 2 weeks, I lost my job. I was terminated without cause for what I thought I was doing a great job. I lost my marriage of 20 years. So my wife and I, after 20 years, decided to do the conscious uncoupling and separating. My health was deteriorating. And to add to the mix, we had to put my dog down. We had an 11-year-old Chihuahua mix that we had to put down. So all of this happened at the same time. So the perfect storm is when everything happens at the same time, when everything that can go wrong seems to go wrong at the same time. And any one of those things could have put me in a very dark place. But I had a toolkit, I had a system. Okay, so I talk more about this perfect storm on my website if you want to watch the video, and I have it on YouTube as well, but I want to keep it short for the purpose of this particular exercise. I want to focus on the system itself, which helped me recovered. And then a few years, well, actually early on into that recovery is when I met Mitra, and she helped me bring the rest of the way with the grief recovery method. So this is the system that I've been using for years and years. I developed it about 15 years ago when I began being interested in teaching project management, leadership, which eventually became positive leadership, communication, coaching. I started noticing a pattern between all of the disciplines that I was studying. There was basically 5 steps to almost everything. Okay, so if you think of any process, project management, leadership, coaching, there's usually 4 to 5 steps, maybe a couple of additional steps if you refine the methodology more, but typically it can be captured in this dream master key. And where I got the inspiration from this particular tool is a story that I came across. I can't remember the name of the author, so I can't give him credit, but he was talking about an experiment that a young worker was trying out with young boys at risk. Okay, so troublemakers. And so he had this experiment where he put out a bunch of keys in the field, and only one of those keys would open this chest that was at the front of the field, and the chest was full of candies, chocolate bars, and potato chips, and so on. So he told the kids that these are the rules. You can go off by your own, try to find the right key. You can work with a team if you want, and so on. And that's exactly what happened. The kids, the boys went off looking. Some worked in large groups, small groups, medium groups. Some decided to go off on their own, and some even decided not to play at all. And it was a smaller group that found the key, and one of the larger groups complaining because, that's not fair, we should have had the key. And what he observed during the experiment was that all the keys in that field at some point in time opened a lock, opened an opportunity. So he compared keys to experiences in your life where you walk along, you pick up a workshop, you pick up a course at university, college, you pick up a book, right? You pick up experiences, you pick up experiments, and so on. And at some point in time, that key is going to open an opportunity. And I went, wow, what if I had a master key? What if I had a key that could open multiple opportunities? And that's where the inspiration came for the Dream Master Key. So let me explain briefly what the DREAM stands for. DREAM is an acronym, okay? So the D stands for discover. It's all around self-awareness. And self-awareness has been deemed by Harvard professors to be the #1 leadership challenge of the 21st century. The biggest thing is understanding ourselves, our teams, our organizations, and our communities. Very, very important. That's the starting point. The next one is R, which is reach. Okay, so reach is all about reaching for the stars. Okay, reaching out there for that stretch is having a personal vision when it applies to personal growth, personal development, personal mastery. It's about having a shared vision when it comes down to the team level and organizational level, is something in the future that hasn't happened yet that we strive towards. And the first two steps, the D and the R, are the pillars of the system. Okay, so they form the foundation. And what we'll learn as it applies to personal resilience is if we can master the self-awareness in the now, especially as it applies to happiness, if we can create more happiness in the now and have a strong vision of the future, that's where the magic happens. Those are the two pillars. If you can reach a high on those two things, high self-awareness and happiness, and a clear, strong personal vision, that is a great starting point for building personal resilience. Okay. The next 3 steps are the accelerators. That's what enables us to get from where we're at today to where we want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Okay, accelerators. The E stands for engage and elaborate. So engaging with our teams to co-create, but also elaborating the plan, is having a plan, right? There's a lot of gurus out there that talk about having a personal vision without the planning or the execution. I think there's a place for that, trusting in the universe, but I think that you can get faster, better results if you have a solid plan and solid execution. So engage and elaborate, that's the planning part of it. The act is the doing, so the execution, because without execution, without action, a plan is simply wishful thinking. It's just not going to happen. And then finally, we have the M, which is all around metrics, monitoring, motivating. Okay, so the celebration piece of the piece. So the saying that what gets measured gets done. So it's important to have a feedback mechanism. That's the loop that you find in here, the feedback into the rest of the system. So the system starts over and over again. It's iterative. Okay, we can have iterations. We can complete this master plan today, and next year we can fine tune it. We can refine it. Okay, so I'm going to run you through a bit more of the details of the system. So the discover, as I mentioned, has to do with the now, the self-awareness. And here we speak about, in particular, strengths, knowing your strengths, understanding your weaknesses, identifying and naming your values and your beliefs, and especially your limiting beliefs. Okay, so here's a summary of what's included in this part of the system. It's all about being, paying attention, and self-awareness. It's respecting the past, but staying in the present. We want to identify and build on our strengths. And we talk about a system here that I call the Me, We, Us Plus environment positive leadership system. So it's an inside out approach to leadership. It's understanding ourselves first as a person, as a leader, and that could be a leader with a small L, not necessarily a capital L. And so the one thing that I say about leadership is that it always starts with me. You've got to do the inside work first, because me is the only person that you can change. Can't change other people. You can influence them, right? You can teach them, you can coach them, and so on, but you can't control what they do, but you control your own actions. So that's the me, we, us. So the me is personal. The we is the people closest to us. In our families, that would be our family members, our friends, our family. At work, those would be our teams. The us stands for the business, the organization, our career, and so on. And then the environment is the bucket. That's where we are right now, is in our own our largest spaces, our house, our office space, our cars, and so on, our backyards. So especially important here is to have self-awareness around beliefs, values, and to stay curious, is to always self-evaluate. Where am I at? Self-reflect. What happened? What's the significance to me? And so on. And I like to start with the W5 here. Is who, what, where, when, why of any given situation. So here's the me, we, us framework. We'll have a look at this later, because we have an exercise that uses this exact framework. I look at the whole person, so the whole life garden in the Discover, as a crucial starting point. Okay, so we want to evaluate where we're at right now. What's our level of personal satisfaction with the 4 quadrants of life: the me, the we, the us, and the plus. The me includes spiritual, mental, and physical health. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, because those are 3 very important components. When I combine that with our closest relationships in our environment, I call those the 5 batteries of life. They have to be replenished. They have to be recharged on a daily basis. And I have an interesting story to tell you about that one tomorrow. It came to me in a dream. I won't share any more right now, but I want you to come back tomorrow to hear that story. So the me is the spiritual, mental, physical health. The we, that's going to the basically our closest relationships, would be our relationship with our very close significant other, or children, or people that we care about the most. Then we get into friendship, our friends. And like I said, in our team environment, we look at our teams. In the work environment, we look at our teams. We have the us. So typically we look at job, career, vocation, or business. And what you call it is very significant, right? For most people, a job is simply to pay the bills. A career is when things starts happening. And then for the lucky few, we find our vocation, which is that thing that we love to do so much that we would do for free if we had to. So that's our vocation. And I also throw business in there. Income is the money that you earn, and wealth is the money that you get to keep. And then finally, we go into the plus side of the model, which is our membership in our community. So this is all about community, our membership, our contribution, and then our sense of adventure in this great big planet. So this is the model that we're going to work through in the next couple of days, in terms of first assessing where we're at, but then we're going to find, we're going to learn some techniques to improve our scores in all these areas. Okay, and we'll focus more specifically on the me and a bit of the we, okay? Because that's really the starting point. That's the keystone one there, is to work on me first, right? I need to put my oxygen mask on before I can put anybody else's oxygen mask on. So that'll be the focus for the next couple of days with my positive leadership system. And then Mitra is going to take you the rest of the way tomorrow afternoon and on the next day. Also related to that system is what I call the inner-outer life iceberg, okay? So we have this iceberg, and for most of you know this, maybe some people don't, is that the naked eye, the naked human eye, only sees a very small portion of the iceberg at sea, typically 5 to 10%. The bulk of the iceberg lies below the waterline. And people are kind of made the same way, right? We see, I'm looking at Mitra, Jekka, and others right now, and I can see their behaviors, I can hear their words when they talk to me, when they talk to us. But what's happening under the waterline, I don't get to see. What they're thinking, what they're feeling, and then what's driving those thoughts and those feelings, the values, the beliefs, the intentions, the limiting beliefs, right? That's all below the waterline. And as a matter of fact, a lot of this stuff is subconscious. We're not even sure that it's, subconscious, unconscious, whatever word you want to use. We're not even aware that it's happening. Neurologists and neurolinguistic people are studying this. And right now, it's estimated that 90% of what we believe as adults was programmed into us before the age of 7. So clearly 90% of what we do is basically on autopilot based on programming that for many of us happened many, many years ago before the age of 7. So a lot of this stuff is unconscious. Okay, so our beliefs, our values, they drive our emotions and our thoughts. And sometimes we're not even sure that it's happening. So we're going to learn some techniques on how to identify some of those. That's something that I've been working very hard in the last few years, is identifying for where I have some low scores in my whole life garden. What are some potential sources of limiting beliefs that are holding me back? And we'll have an exercise for that early on. So that's the inner-outer iceberg. Also an important part of this, we won't spend a lot of time on this in the workshop, but it's part of the strengths movement, is identifying what our strengths are and building our strengths in the workplace. Very, very important to attain success in our team environments. This particular quote is from a book by Marcus Buckingham. A definition of a strength is something consistent, near perfect behavior 98% of the time. We have an exercise later on today that talks about you at your best. Is when did you feel that you had this level of strength, building on your strengths, okay? That you showed up consistently and had near perfect performance behavior 98% of the time. That's the definition of a strength. So now we're moving into the reach part of the model. This is all about seeing the future, having clarity, building bliss, believing in our abilities in the future, having a vision of a better future. And here we talk about affirmations and afformations. And in particular, tomorrow I'll talk about desire statements, which have turned out to be a very, very powerful source of reprogramming for myself. So I have desire statements for all the areas in my life that I talked about, the me, we, us, plus. I have 7 of them. Maybe Mitra will talk about the importance of the number 7 in her neurolinguistic programming. It's about as many things as we can handle in our heads at any one time. So I focus on these 7 desire statements almost 3 times a day. I just repeat them, reprogramming myself. And I've had some tremendous results as an experiment. In here, we also have the 4 soul questions by Deepak Chopra. I love these questions. I ask myself this, like, who am I? What do I want? what's my purpose, and what am I grateful for? Gratitude has been proven to be one of the most beneficial practices. Okay, we can combine that with compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. That's a trifecta when it comes into, you know, if we go back to our self-awareness. If we can practice those things on a daily basis, we naturally become happier. Okay, compassion, gratitude, and forgiveness. Later on today, we'll talk about the inspiring conversations, is thinking about what does my ideal life look 3, 5, 10 years from now? And 3 years has proven out over the last little while that I'm learning this material. 3 years is kind of the sweet spot because it's long enough to be a bit of a stretch, but it's not so long that it's too fuzzy. Okay, so 3 years is kind of the sweet spot. And also, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year, but underestimate what we can get done in 3 years. So we'll have an exercise around this inspiring conversation where we can interview each other. So we can act both as a coach and as a coachee during this exercise to start exploring what our desired future state might look like. I often ask this question in a large audience when I speak in the corporate world, is who here has a written down personal vision statement? And in a group of 20 to 30, usually lucky if 1 or 2 people raise their hand. It's a very small percentage, and these are typically managers and leaders. You know, having a personal vision, having the reach, is a game changer because you start living your life on purpose. You start having clarity around where you're going, and you start making decisions according to that clarity. And that's a game changer. That's really important. We'll spend some time on that tomorrow in terms of how to develop one if you don't have one, and if you have one, how to refine it. So here's one of the tools that we're going to look at. I call it Robin's Hedgehog Principle. It's inspired by Jim Collins' Hedgehog Principle. He was talking about, first of all, what are we deeply passionate about? Okay, so asking yourself the question, what am I deeply passionate about? What do I care so much about that I would do regardless? What can I be the best in the world at, is what Jim Collins said, but I think that we should reframe that. What can we be the best for the world? What's our greatest gifts, our greatest strengths to give back to the world, to our communities, to our workplace? Okay, so that's where the strengths come around, is identifying those combined with our values and our beliefs, and having the ability to give our very best to our communities. And we have how do you serve your resource engine? Jim Collins, in his original book, Good to Great, he called that, what is the world prepared to pay us for? Because otherwise it's a pastime. But then when he started talking about nonprofits and government, so basically non-profit oriented organization, is identifying what's your resource engine and what you need to do to service that engine. So here I've used an example, is in the environmental movement, we talk about the planet, people, profit, in that order as an example. Okay, so that could be what drives your resource engine. Now we get into the engage, elaborate. Remember, that's the planning part of the framework. So this is planning, strategy, iteration, progressive elaboration. These are concepts that we speak of in project management. Is you don't have to hit it perfect first time out, right? You can build a plan that's a living plan, and then you can iterate it next time. I mean, this initiative that Mitra and I are working on, I'm sure will evolve over the next 4 months. This is our very first public session, and we hope to fine-tune, improve over the next 4 months, where we go from good to great. Okay, iterations, progressive elaboration, very important part of planning. In the system, we'll talk about the life breakdown structure, which is based on the work breakdown structure of project management. Is how can we look at each area of our life and break it down into components right? When we talk about me, for instance, as that bucket, that part of it is like, oh my God, I don't know where to start. Well, why don't we start breaking it down from me to spiritual, and what are some practices that I can do to improve my spirituality? So this, we'll talk about personal planning preferences as well, and then smarter objectives and having the courage to carry on. In particular, we'll talk about Lifesavers as a daily practice. So this is borrowed from The Miracle Morning by Elrod. Silence in the form of meditation, affirmations and afformations. We'll give an example of that today. Visualization. I believe that Mitra will walk us through some thoughts on that as well, and some exercises. Exercise, right? So aerobics, anaerobics, stretching. Reading, something uplifting, not the news. And then scribing is reflection on papers. Journaling, I like to refer as scribing and journaling as meditation on paper. You know, I have my book here with my green screen. It's probably difficult to see, but let me see if I can catch the sweet spot here. Volume 56. That's how much of an avid journaler I am. I am on volume 56, 300-page journals, double pages. That's 600 pages that I produce every couple of months or so of content or thoughts or reflections. We'll talk more about journaling later on. Okay, so this is one of the key elements of positive leadership is positive emotions. Okay, great starting point. We'll talk more about it later on, but this is work done by Barbara Fredrickson, and she has identified these 10 emotions as the top 10 emotions. The top 5 is joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, and hope. She says that these occur 75% frequency of positive emotions. The other comprise pretty much the rest. There are other ones. In fact, when we talk about this later, I'll share with you some of the themes that I put in these. For example, when I think of joy, I don't just think of joy. I think of joy, bliss, and happiness as a trifecta. That is more powerful to me. That is more inspiring to me. And I'll share my thoughts with that later on in the workshop. Then we have pride, amusement, inspiration, awe, love. And the key question when it comes to personal resilience is how can we attract more of these emotions in our lives on a daily basis? Okay. Finally, we get into the act and the monitor of the system. This is all about the doing, the measuring, practicing, and performing, scheduling. And here we need discipline and consistency, right? Consistency eats intensity for breakfast. This is the game changer. And this leads to success and celebration. All right, we're going to take a break now. When we come back later on, we have a practice is an instrument that I would like you to fill out. It's called the Whole Life Garden Assessment, and there's an accompanying assessment there. There's a few parts to it. First of all, you assess your level of personal satisfaction on your whole life garden. Okay, I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Then we start looking for limiting beliefs. Okay, so I don't want you to get too hung up on that part of it, because quite frankly, it took me like 3 years to get to where I'm at on limiting beliefs, is trying to identify what they are, give it a name. Okay, and then the third part is to look at your personal vision. Is it written down? Do you even have one? Do you have one for each area of your life? Okay, and you're going to assess your level of clarity on your personal vision, and that's going to give you an overall score. So I'll give you an example here. This is me a few years ago after my perfect storm. Okay, so I started teaching this material. I've kept it for demonstration purposes. It's changed quite a bit now, but right after I lost my job, I got separated, lost my dog. This is how I was feeling. Okay, so if I looked at my life, I start with me, and I give a score of 0 to 10 on my level of satisfaction. So let's start with spiritual. Okay, so spiritual, I was in pretty good shape. I had a meditation practice for the past few years. It was serving me very well. I still have a meditation practice. I meditate first thing in the morning. Quite often I meditate after lunch, and I meditate before going to bed. So I'm I'm a avid meditator. I believe in it quite a bit. We'll talk more about that tomorrow in terms of some specific techniques to meditate. So it's a matter of finding the system that works for you and the sequence. On the mental, also very strong there. My state of emotion still pretty good, despite what was happening to me, because I had the system that I just described to you, right? The Dream Master Key was giving me purpose, was giving me a method of planning and moving forward. Then we had the physical. Well, as I mentioned, things were sort of falling a little bit apart before my perfect storm, but we discovered later on that I had a massive kidney stone on my left side, okay, that had grown over the years, probably over 20 years. It was so big. It was like I think they were talking about 3 centimeters long, which is a massive kidney stone. In fact, they couldn't remove it safely without removing the kidney. So they gave me the news that I had to have major surgery to remove my left kidney, and I had to come to terms with that. So at that point, you'll notice here a bit of a dip in my health. I was rating myself a 7 out of 10. Okay. Now we go to the me. Well, I had just gone through separation, so that took a big dip here. Was my closest relationship was in trouble. Friendships were pretty solid at an 8, and then team pretty good at a 7. Okay, so I rate myself on these. Then I move over to the us. Career, very happy with where things were heading in terms of a decision, but I took a financial blow because of losing work. And then especially as we moved into COVID, that was a significant hit as well on the income and wealth. And this is completely subjective, right? You decide where you want to put these dots. So for some people, maybe this was very good, but for me, I needed some work. Then we get into the community part of it. So membership was very strong. At the time, I was a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and I was also the president in 2020. So in here on contribution, I felt very strong as well. And then adventure, kind of going into COVID, I took a hit like a lot of people. Didn't travel as much, but I decided to travel in my backyard, to have learning adventures in my own backyard in beautiful British Columbia. And I rediscovered my passion for mountain biking and hiking. So there you have it, folks. That's what a whole life garden assessment looks like. We have an assessment for you in the program that you can fill out. And then, like I said, if there are any gaps in here, so for example, for me down here, if there's an area that's got a gap, is there a limiting belief that's holding me back? And in fact, what I've done now, the practice that I'm doing these days, is I have 3 self-limiting beliefs for each of these 12 things that I go through on a daily basis and reprogram. I delete them, I uncreate them, and I destroy them. We'll talk about that later on tomorrow. For example, I'll share an example of a limiting belief that I learned at a very young age about my physical health. I was a very small, scrawny kid. In fact, when I was quite young, I had flat feet. I couldn't run, I couldn't skate, and I was weak. Those were my beliefs that were instilled in me before the age of 9, right? I completely shattered those beliefs later on by getting into a fitness regime, right? More recently, I started this practice called conscious walking and this Japanese yoga technique, where I've actually cured my flat feet at the age of 55, believe it or not. So it's amazing the stuff that you can do when you can identify your limiting belief and reprogram yourself. using these tools and techniques. So from a physical perspective, I thought that I was weak, I couldn't skate, and I couldn't run, right? And that's what I believed for many, many years until I was able to overturn those beliefs. Like I said, I took on a physical fitness regime in my early teens, 14, 15. I became a good runner, a good skater, and quite strong for my size. So there you have it, folks. That's the whole life garden assessment and the tie-in to limiting beliefs. Okay, so you likely have some limiting beliefs in each of these categories. And even, like I said, I have 3 for each of the physical, mental, spiritual, and so on. And then finally, once we've, so then we look at our clarity of vision, okay? And in the assessment, there's a score for that as well. So you'll have a score from 0 to 10 for your personal vision. When you take your average score for your whole life garden and compare it to your average score for your personal vision, you're going to end up in one of these categories, okay? So if you're below 5 and below 5 for both happiness now and personal vision, you would end up in the victim stage. If you have a high level of happiness now and lower score on the personal vision, you would be in the awakened stage of personal resilience. If you are a low happiness now, high personal vision, that's the motivated individual. Okay. And if you're fortunate enough to get 5 or above for each of the categories, you are in the inspired category. You are a resilient person. And resilient people tend to attract luck. They tend to attract fortune, as in fortunate, not necessarily money. And they attract people because they resonate more consistently, more positively, and so on. And that's the purpose of this workshop, folks, is to get you to the inspired category. And with that, we'll take a break. When we come back, we complete the assessment and share our findings with our teammates.